Hello there, I'm Jimmy Vegas and this is how to make an RPG in Unity 5 and welcome to episode 7. So this episode we're going to cover a couple of things. Firstly we're going to cover something called RAYCAST and I'll explain that in just a second. We're going to do some UI as well and we're going to start building up our very first quest from this quest board. So raycasting is a way of allowing, for example, our player to determine how far away it is from a specific object or whichever object it's looking at. So in this case, we'll need our player, which is right here, and we'll need to determine how far away we are looking at this particular notice board. So to do that, we're going to create a nice little script. So head into our scripts folder down here, right click, create C# script, and I'm going to call this player casting. Open it up in MonoDevelop or Visual Studio, whichever one you have. And to do this, we firstly need to get rid of void start. We don't need start. We just have the void update because we want this to be ran every single frame that the game runs. So we're going to have two variables. The first one is going to be the distance which we can access from any specific point. For example, if we have a different script and we want to reference this number, we can, because we're going to do it slightly differently than what we've done in the past couple of scripts. So we're going to do public, and where we'd usually state our type here, which we're going to use int, we're actually going to put the word static and then our type int. That word static means that we can then access this variable from a different script. And I'm going to call this, let's call it distance from target. Semicolon. The next one I'm going to have as an internal version of that, so as we can see it in the inspector panel here, because when we use static, it doesn't appear here in the inspector panel, but we kind of would like to know what that number is. So in fact, we're not going to have that as an integer. That should be a float, because it's doubtful it's going to be a whole number. So yeah, public static float distance from target, and then we'll have public float, and I'll call this one, what should I call this one? To target. So it's like the internal version of it, as I say. So to do this, within the void update, we need then to create another quick little variable that we can use just in void update. And that's going to be a type called raycast hit. And we're just going to call that hit for now. Semicolon. So the next thing we need to do is we need to create an if statement. So if, open bracket, and here we determine our actual raycast number. So this will be raycast dot it'd be physics.raycast, so because we're using physics at this point, dot raycast, and then open bracket, and we need to transform dot position of whatever object this is attached to. So transform dot position, and then comma, and then transform dot transform direction. And note at this point the transform we're using here is lowercase t. However, after the decimal point we have transform direction, but that's a capital D and a capital T on them. So make sure you do have the capitalization correct because it is case sensitive. And we need to define that we want to look just forward, and we can do that using part of vector 3. So vector 3 dot forward, and then close bracket, comma, and then we need to output the variable, or rather output the number to the variable which is raycast hit. So we need to put the word out and then our variable just here on the raycast hit and call it hit. So that's that done. So then close bracket, and then open curly bracket. And now what we're going to do is make to target, not touch target, to target equal to hit dot distance. So that's our internal variable stated of what it's going to be. We then need to make our main variable equal to toTarget as well. So distance from target is equal to target, semicolon, and then we close curly bracket to end that if statement, and then save the script. So if we head back to Unity, if you do have any problems with the script at any point, just head over to the website, head to Downloads and Assets section, to the RPG page, and you can download that script for free. So it should work for you, nice and simple. So now, this player casting script, attach that to your FPS controller. And on the FPS controller, in the inspector panel, you'll see down here, just toTarget appears. So even though we've defined 3 variables, only toTarget appears. So if we press play now, whilst having the FPS controller selected, you should be able to see that number changes down there. So as we walk towards the notice board, you should be able to see that it's quite small. So it's about 2 or 3. So we want at this point to recognize that once we're here at this board with this kind of number, lowish, we want to be able to pick up whatever's on this quest board. So let's set up some UI to interact with that. So game object, UI, text. I'm going to double click and pan the camera around so as I can see our entire canvas, or most of the canvas at least. Now what I'm going to do is, like you would find in most RPG games of this era, once you hover over something, you would have a prompt on screen to say touch or read, and you would press the letter E on your keyboard. So let's arrange that kind of thing. So we want our anchoring point to be center, which is fine. So let's zero out our position on the X and Y. Next, let's have this as the key that we're going to use. So in this case, it's going to be the E key. So I'm going to put it in square brackets. And I'm going to format it. Let's have it slightly larger. Let's have that as maybe 22. Let's have it as white. And alignment is going to be center. I'm just going to bring it up a little to about there. Now, just below this, I want it to say, for example, the read or touch or do whatever, the action that we're going to perform. So I'm going to duplicate that text field over here. So hold Control, press D. And let's rename the first one to action. Actually, not there, sorry. We want to F2 here and call action character. And this one we'll just call action text. So let's bring it down to about there. And let's just change this text to something that we can use at some later point. Or should we leave it blank and we can edit it? In fact, we'll leave it blank for now and we can come to it during a script. So to get this functioning correctly, we need the raycast which we've built. So once the raycast kind of hovers over the target, we want this to appear. And we also want to be able to click it when we are close enough. So firstly, let's add the E key as our action key. So to do that, we need to go to Edit, and then go to Project Settings, and then Input. Click on Axis over here, and you should have 18 by default, I think. What are we going to call this? Do you think we should call this the action key, or should we call it submit? Let's call it action, I think. So change the size from whatever it is to 1 more, and it should duplicate whatever is last in your list. So in this case, it's duplicated cancel. Click on the arrow next to cancel, and let's call this action. And you want to change the positive button to whatever button you want your action button to be. In most cases, it's E, so let's set it as E on the keyboard. That's all there is to do to actually set up the keys. So if you want further keys in your game, you would do it through that menu. And we'll more than likely go through that at a later date anyway. So the next thing we need to do is we need to add in on, in fact, let's zoom in our notice board first. What we need to do is add in a quest on this board first of all. And we're going to do that using a plane. So game object, 3D object, and plane right there. It'll turn out to be this huge, massive white thing when you start, but let's shrink it. So let's have it as 0.25 by 0.25 by 0.25 to start off with. And let's change the rotation on the X to 90. So let's type in 90. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a texture which we're going to place onto this plane, which is going to be our legible quest. So in this case, if we go and drag and drop this, which I've already pre-built, the quest 001 image, bring it into your textures. You can get this on the website if you want to, but I'll also upload this version of it, the blank canvas, so you can input your own quest on there rather than use the same one I have. So now let's bring this forward just a touch and place it just in front of the notice board. Drag and drop the texture on there, and let's reduce the size to how we would want to see it. So we need to make it a little thinner, so let's have that as 0.15. Let's decrease the height to maybe 0.18. So it'd be 0.18 there. Still looks a bit big, doesn't it? So let's reduce it some more. So 0.1 and 0.15. So let's have that on our notice board right there. So hopefully when we press play now, we should be able to see over our notice board our first quest. Okay, excellent. So you can see this is all kind of starting to come together now. So what I think we're going to do is we'll start building this particular script, and then we'll add in the trigger on here which we want to use. So head to our scripts folder, and I'll tell you what, within our scripts folder, let's right click, create a new folder, and let's have this folder as quests. Let's try and keep everything as neat and tidy as possible. And then right click, create C# script, and let's call this quest 001 take. Open it up in MonoDevelop, Visual Studio, whichever. And we're going to have a couple of different variables in this. So we're going to reference the player casting script just here. So we need to, oops, sorry, I have to close that. Let's open it up again. We're going to have a variable in here which references this player casting script, the distance from target within here. We'll also have a couple of other ones using the UI that we've just created. And we'll do a couple of other things as well, because the idea of what I want to happen is when we have a look at this quest, at least in this tutorial, it'll pan to a different camera angle and show us the quest itself. And then next episode we'll work on accepting, declining, and then working on the quest itself. So let's get rid of void start. We don't need that. And let's get rid of that little note. So let's start with our first variable. So it's public float, and we'll call it the distance semicolon. Next one is going to be a game object. Game object. Remember, capitalization is massively important. We'll have this as command display. So that'll be the E key that we've already set. Public game object, and we'll call this command text. So this will be whatever we want our text here to say, our action text. So in fact, I think I'll change these to action display and action text. Let's keep everything together. So at this point, let's decide what our action text is going to say. Let's say read notice. So that's what it'll say for us at this point. Next one, public, we're going to have UI quest. Sorry, that's going to be game object UI quest. And what this one is going to be the quest on screen so we can read it in full. Next, we're going to have the player. So game object again, and just call it the player. semicolon. And the last one, we're going to have a different camera to view the quest reading itself. So public game object, and let's call this notice cam. We'll set that up when we have finished writing this script. So within this first bit, the void update, what we need to do is make the distance, this first one, equal to the player casting script. So we can do that by typing the distance, and remember, case sensitive, equals player casting dot distance from target, semicolon. So the way this is working is it's referencing this script, and then it's referencing this particular variable within that script. So if you want to do it with any other script, for example, you would always have the dot. So it's always the script first, then the variable. So remember, that's the variable right there. So that's all we need in the void update. We need it to constantly monitor the distance and check it for us. Next thing we need to do is a little function called onMouseOver. So we need to check if our mouse is going over this particular trigger. So to do that, if, then in brackets, the distance is, I'm going to put less than or equal to, so what do you think is a good distance to be away from this notice board? I'm going to put 3 for now and see how that pans out. I'll give you a demonstration of this anyway. And then open curly bracket. So make sure that's in brackets right there, remember. And what we need to do here is, let's see, what do we need to do first? Oh, we need to display our 2 on-screen functions, which is the E key and the text. So that will be action display dot set active true in brackets, semicolon. The same will also apply to the action text. So action text dot set active, that's also true, semicolon. And I think that's it really, isn't it? That's all we need to put there because they're both going to display. So close curly bracket on that if statement. Next one, what we need to do is if we actually press the E key while we're looking at it. So if we want to start kind of initiating this quest. So we can do that by if, then open bracket, and it'll be input, and that's a capital I, dot get button down. And then in brackets and quotes, we need to put whatever we put in here in our input settings, and we call this action. So whatever you input here, you put that word right here. Action, in quotes, close bracket, and close bracket to close off that if statement, and then open curly bracket. So if we are pressing the action button, what else do we need to do? Well, we need to check if we are actually in range of this notice board. So we need this same if statement here. If the distance is less than or equal to 3, then perform the following. So we've got a nested if function here. So nested is when you have multiple functions leading in from each other like this. And you'll notice as I go along, I always do an indent here. So you can see it starts here and it indents to here. The next line will start here. It keeps things neat and tidy, and it helps if you need to debug and look for errors. So when your scripts start getting quite long, it does help to indent. So what we need to do here is action display dot set active false, because we need to turn it off because we've already initiated the quest or picking up the notice. Action text dot set active, and that is going to be false as well, semicolon. Next thing we need to do is turn the UI quest on. So UI quest dot set active false, semicolon. Next thing, we need to put the notice camera on and then turn the player off. So nice and simple. Notice cam dot set active true, and then the player dot set active false. So it's probably wise to make sure you do put the new camera on first before you turn off the player. You may have although it may just be a quick frame, it may be something which kind of glitches, and for a split second you won't have any camera, so it may cause a little problem. So I always turn on a new camera before I turn one off. So once you've got that done, close curly bracket and then close curly bracket again. So we've closed the main if function here. Next thing we need to do is we need to do another command, or another void, but this is going to be in fact, I've just noticed here on void update, we actually need to put void on mouse over, open close bracket, open curly bracket. So you can see here that we have created another function. So I'm just going to indent all this now. As I say, if you have problems with scripts, head over to the website. You'll be able to get them there for free. Hopefully you won't have too many problems with the script, because it is somewhat simple once you get used to it. So as I say, the last function we need here is void on mouse exit, because at the moment, once our mouse crosses over the particular object that we'll be looking at, it's going to set these as active, but then there's no other option to turn them off if we stop looking at it. So we need void on mouse exit, open close bracket, open curly bracket, and then it's just quite simply a case of the inverse of what we have here. So it's action display dot set active, and that's false, and then action text dot set active is also false, semicolon, and then close curly bracket to close up void on mouse exit, and then save that script. This should hopefully not give us any errors. And we are in the clear, no errors, excellent. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add in that UI quest and the notice camera. So game object, UI, and let's go to raw image. Click on that and let's get it into position. So I kind of want it to appear in the middle of the screen. So I'm going to anchor it to the middle, zero out the position, and then I'm going to drag and drop the texture of quest 001 over here onto where it says texture. And then it's just a case of expanding this as big as you would like. So let's have a width of 300. 300 is a bit small, isn't it, maybe? Let's try 400 by 600. Okay, maybe a bit too big. Let's stick with our 300 by 500. So we'll have that. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tick this little option here to turn it off, and the same with action text, off, and same with action character, off. And now let's add in our extra camera. First, actually, we'll rename this plane to say quest 01. So right click, rename, quest 001 notice. Let's zoom in. And let's get another camera in place. So game object, down here, camera. Down here you can see the camera preview. So we want to move the camera around. Let's turn it 180 degrees so it's looking at the quest board. Let's pull it upwards, maybe move it closer, and then rotate on the X to look down at the quest board. I'll move it across a little. Okay, so that looks pretty good there. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to right click, and then what we're going to do, rename. Let's just have this as notice cam. So next thing we need to do, or the final thing we need to do for this tutorial, is add in a trigger on this notice board. And I always find using cubes as triggers is so much easier than anything else. So game object, 3D object, cube, place it in front of the notice board and then change the size of it. So I'm going to change on the Z to 0.2, and let's increase it a little, so we'll have 1.5. to, if at 1.3 should do. And let's increase the scale on the X to 1.1. Okay, so that looks fine. Next, I'm going to turn off Mesh Renderer, so we can't actually see it. And let's pull it back a little to about there. And lastly, hopefully, if we have done this right, we just need to put our script that we've written, the quest script, over this cube here. So I'm going to right click and rename, and let's call this notice trigger. And then we just need to define our variables here. So action display is action character, action text is action text, UI quest, which we will rename before we add it. So quest 001 UI. And let's add that into there. The player, which is the FPS controller, and then finally the notice cam, which is this one here. And now let's turn off this notice cam up here with this little tick and press play. So hopefully we should be able to go over to our notice board, and you can see our action key has appeared to say E to read notice. And as we back away, you can see it disappears. There we go. So there's that in action. So next what we need to do is let's press E and have a look at the quest. Okay, so something has gone wrong there. Let me have a quick check, because we should have had the UI quest appear. Ah, sorry, yeah, there we are. So that should be true, not false. So save that. The UI quest should be set true. So let's try once more. Head over to the notice board and let's have a look at our quest. Okay, brilliant. So next episode, what we're going to do is we're going to add some button options onto this to say accept quest, decline quest. We'll probably get more and more into triggers. We'll add some more UI to see what we can do in our quest as well. So you can see we're well on our way now to developing what would be an RPG. A lot of people have also asked about the hearts up here. Now, the idea of this is when I started the series, I was asked if I could do something like a Zelda health system. So although you could use that, in the next couple of episodes, I'll move on to something like more of an Elder Scrolls health system, and because we'll be getting into a lot of statistics and numbers soon. So I may move on to that. It may feel more natural for this style of game. But if you want to keep the Zelda heart system, that's fine. So guys, for a challenge, next episode, or rather before next episode, if you can, you guys try and complete what you think should happen next at this point. So we've got here, we're looking at our quest. You guys try and do what you think will be next. If you can't figure it out, don't worry, we'll do it in the next tutorial anyway. So guys, until then, thank you very much for watching.